Here we had Our Lady in this century showing children the existence of hell, how awful, hideous, and permanent it is. And yet Francis now not only tells Scalfari, says, oh yeah, hell is just a psychological place, a place in your mind.
There is a new Pachamama Mass up for approval in May by the Vatican. We also have Cardinals Muller and Burke calling out the bishops in Germany to have a canonical trial for heresy. Pope Francis has said that hell is not a place, and YouTube has censored Lifesite once again. Not only that, but Xi Jinping has met with President Putin in Moscow. All that and more on this episode of Faith and Reason. Stay tuned. Hello, Lifesite friends. Aren't you sick of the cancel culture? Aren't you sick of the overlords at YouTube deciding what you'll be able to see and what you won't? Are you sick of them dictating morality and your use of pronouns? Well, we have had enough. With rampant attacks and continuous censorship we face here at Lifesite News, we've decided to bite the bullet. We are taking video into our own hands and we're playing on our own terms rather than the whims of big tech. We have launched our own video platform. Now we have the ability to showcase our important news and views without the risk of being banned and silenced. Defenders of faith, life, family, and freedom can now speak freely at Lifesite News without censorship from anti-life, anti-family, anti-faith, anti-freedom folks who seem to run all the big tech companies. This, of course, takes tons of hard work and also your support. So we're in the midst of our quarterly spring fundraising campaign, and we are in need of your support, both prayerful and financial. These fundraising campaigns are vital to our survival and the ability to broadcast the truth for free all around the world. So with the launch of our new video platform, we will be incurring many new ongoing expenses due to the size and bandwidth of our servers, the personnel expenses to maintain such a large system, and for new and improved features that we hope to add in the coming months. We must raise our campaign goal of an absolute minimum of $500,000 to continue the fight to withdraw completely from big tech and strengthen our ability to survive in the giant online world. So please donate at the link in the description below. Thank you for your prayers, your support, and your dedication. We are honored to be in this fight with you. May God bless you. Liz Yor, so good to be with you.
Good to be with you, John Henry.
We are here alone today. Father is MIA. So let's keep him in our prayers. And let's begin at least with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Dr. Micah Hickson over at Lifesite News broke this major story on Friday and then did a follow-up about this new Pachamama Mass. And it was really stunning because she actually got the draft of the new Mass, the changes to the Roman Missal for the Mass, and it's full of very concerning things. Do you have some details for us?
Yes. I mean, this is, in one respect, kind of one of the biggest stories to hit this papacy. And it's also quite interesting because I think it's a logical extension of the last 10 years. From the Pachamama Mass, from Laudato Si, from the Amazon Synod, and frankly, from the Abu Dhabi Declaration. All are intertwined, as well as the Pope's initiatives with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Treaty. All of this is really part of the foundation for what is now being set, what we're calling the Pachamama Mass. The Mexican bishops had their Ad Limine meeting with Pope Francis in February of this year, and they sent a proposal for a new rite is going to be given to the Pope in May for approval of a Mayan rite, which is from the Diocese of San Cristobal, which is in the Chiapas area. And as with this Amazonian rite, it is clear that Pope Francis has really signaled that he is in support of what we would call an enculturated form of the Roman Mass. And at the center of this Mayan rite in Mexico are many elements that were on the reform agenda of the 2019 Amazon Synod. But what is extremely difficult, and I have never had such a response from people who are reaching out to me, Catholics. They're very concerned about this because of based on the Mayan Mass as proposed and in the documents that will be submitted. And Mikey, this is extraordinary that you got the draft proposal that's going to be sent to the Vatican. But this is liturgical enculturation with clear signs of idolatry, the worship of gods, a prominent role of women as roles of deacons. And it's really another form of paganism, which is being supported and promoted by Rome. The ancient Mayan religion is permeated with polytheism, the gods of earth, sun, moon, animals, all of them are regarded as gods. And clearly this continues to this day. And they're also supported in this ritual by animism, which is the belief that objects and creatures have a soul, and they are worshiped as well, and also human sacrifice. Now, behind all this, John Henry, is this Cardinal Arizmendi. He's the former bishop of this Mexican diocese, San Cristobal, and he has been saying that the Pope has been encouraging this from the very beginning of his pontificate. And if you've been paying attention to what's been going on with Francis, you can understand that this is the logical extension of his promotion of really this enculturation, this Mayan religion, this pantheism, syncretism that has become, really the troubling element that we saw in Pachamama. And I know Catholics remember when we all raised the concern about the Pachamama, the deity, the female goddess of fertility in the Vatican, worshipped in the Vatican gardens, brought into St. Peter's along with the incense from the almonds. And everybody's saying, oh no, you're just overreacting. That's just a representation of Mary. And no, in fact, once the Amazon Synod ended, we found out, yes, Pachamama is a pagan deity. And what people I think have to remember about all of this is we have to go back to basics. And the basics are, the first commandment is, you shall not have false gods in front of me. And in this Indian theology, this Mayan theology, the earth is mother goddess. And she, as well as many hundreds of other goddesses, are adored and worshiped. There is not one God, but many gods. And this has been going on since, the Spanish friars and Franciscans and Dominicans arrived in Mexico to begin the conversion process. There's also very disconcerting liturgical role for women that in the past pontificate of both John Paul II and with Benedict, they were disciplined to stop having the involvement of women in ordinations and playing a large role in the Mayan masses. And so what we have here is an escalation of, if people will recall the Abu Dhabi Declaration, where Pope Francis signed a document that says God wills all religions. And apparently, he was speaking of this Mayan religion. And there's all sorts of rituals using shells as means of communication with their ancestors, walking on pine needles in the Mass, which is a suggestion that it is the portal to the other world. There's also a Mayan altar, which is in front of and worshipped in front of the actual altar of the Mass. And so these are all very disconcerting symbols, and theology is not a Christian theology. It's using, various symbols of the Catholic faith, but not incorporating the one true God. There's also, which, I think we need to discuss this, in detail, a ritual dance that goes on. Now, I love dance. But dance is a self-expression. It is a self-referential artistic expression. And as we know, the Mass, the whole purpose of the Mass is eyes on Christ. That was the original purpose of the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And so this ritual of a dance, again, draws away from, the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And we saw even Francis in bringing in the Pachamama, there were these Mayan elements brought into the Mass. And many would say that there was a demonic influence brought into the Mass once again in the Vatican. So we need to remember and keep very sacred, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall not have any other gods before me. This is what's going on here. If you look at Laudato Si, the environmental exhortation by Francis, in many of his comments, but in speeches, in fact, when he went to Canada, he talks about the cry of Mother Nature, the cry of Mother Earth, the groan of Mother Earth. This is giving human characteristics to the earth. And as a result, it elevates the earth above man. And what we're seeing now is a deification of nature and a desacralization of man. This is very serious. This is really very troubling because it, at the same time, Pope Francis is elevating the Mayan pagan Mass, he's eliminating the traditional Latin Mass. And as we said last week, there's no surprise about that or coincidence. Interestingly, among the people who were at the Amazon Synod, the cardinals, you had Cardinal Farrell, you had Cardinal Hollerich, you had the LGBT advocates in the dominating it. You had also the climate change, the environmentalists. So this is change the liturgy and change the theology. And what is extremely, concerning to me, Fulton Sheen said, if progress is a straight line, why are we going around in circles? And it does seem that we have come back to this neo-pagan ritual, and we need to call it out for what it was, because the Pachamama represents the conflation of sustainability, environmental justice, indigenous spirituality. It has nothing to do with Catholicism, although Francis continues to say the reason that he is eliminating, suppressing the Latin Masses for the purpose of unity. No, the reason is so these bizarre Mayan pagan rituals can be legitimized by the Catholic Church. Our Blessed Mother came to, in I think 1540s, came to Tepeyac, and that was the center of religious conversion for the Aztecs, although the missionaries were having a great deal of problems with this very thing of letting go of the pagan traditions and embracing Christianity. And so what did our Blessed Mother say to Juan Diego? And this is why she understood what was the essence and what was going on here. She said to Juan Diego, know and understand well, you, the most humble of my sons, that I am the Virgin Holy Mary, Mother of the true God, for whom we have life, and he is the creator of all things, the Lord of heaven and earth. So she was, underscoring and saying that her son, Jesus Christ, was the creator of all of this. And Jesus Christ is the one who must be worshiped and obeyed. So Gaia worship is the new pagan worship, and it rejects Christianity. And it embraces really a political environmental ideology. If you read Laudato Si through those eyes, you will see more of a political agenda at play than you will see a Christian agenda. You know, we had talked about, and you saw this yourself, when Pope Francis was in Canada. He said, I asked the Western grandmother to give us access to the sacred circle of spirits.
Yeah, it wasn't the Pope, it was the shaman at the time. And the Pope was there with his hand on his chest, eyes closed, along with the other cardinals. And the shaman was calling on this, yeah.
Yeah, so that we can be united and stronger together. Well, the main point of Christianity, as G.K. Chesterton said, is that nature is not our mother. Nature's our sister. We can be proud of her beauty since we have the same father, but she has no authority over us. We have to admire, but not imitate her. That was Chesterton in Orthodoxy. So I think, this is pure, unadulterated, intentional, strategic, pagan worship, Gaia worship, in order to lay the groundwork for the one world religion, so that the environmental movement becomes the new ideology, the new religion, if you will. That's why it's so disconcerting. And, it's easy to say, that's just the mind, that's, just a small fringe group. No, it has very significant import for the agenda that's being put in place for the synod on synodality. It's all intertwined. And that's why, it's kudos to Mikey for bringing this out and to seeing, the actual document. We know that this is going to be discussed with the Vatican and with Francis this spring.
If people are wondering, this sounds too unbelievable, please go to lifesitenews.com. Read the story by Dr. Micah Hickson where she reveals the actual document. We were sent the actual document by Cardinal Arizmendi himself. And in there, you'll read exactly as Liz was describing, this Mayan altar. They don't use the name altar now. They use a Mayan something else, but they're still there with the indication to the four cardinal directions, or the four cardinal points, they say, which means the directions that we know from that pagan ceremony at which Pope Francis was at in Canada, that they pray. Those are their gods. We ask the Western grandmother to open the door, said that shaman, to the circle of spirits so they can come and join us. That sounds like an authentic Catholic prayer. That's just very strange, and I don't know where you're living, but this is what we have from the document. Also from the document, you have this dance that they give, a dance of thanksgiving, and it actually says right in the document that the feet of the dancers will caress the face of Mother Earth. So right away, Mother Earth, Pachamama, is right in there in the description of the Mass. This is the official description. This isn't made up or anything. So they're going to do this. As Liz mentioned too, already under JP2 and Benedict, the diocese, San Cristobal, was sanctioned for their practice of ordination of deacons, which was much too linked to having female ordination. The woman, the wife of the deacon, would put her hand on the shoulder of her husband while they are being ordained, and then the women process up with the men, deacons, and the priest at the altar, and they kiss the altar with their husbands and the priest, very much moving, obviously, toward a women priesthood. Now, in addition to all that, this document lays out a new role of something called a presider, who is at this Mass officiating with the priest. In fact, the priest sort of introduces the presider, and then the presider is the one leading the people in prayer at the beginning of the Mass, the middle point of the Mass, and the end of the Mass. So you're talking about, and this again is a lay woman or layman, depending on who the community chooses. And another element that you mentioned, Liz, that Micah draws out in her piece, is the Mayan culture had worship of ancestors. And right in the document, they talk about this getting the approval of the ancestors. The ancestors aren't just all holy Catholics who died, they're also the Mayan pagans who might very well not be in heaven. So what does that mean then when you're dealing with souls who are perhaps in hell and yet calling on them in the Mass? This is just very, very strange. Now, one other really interesting element is that way back when the Amazonian Synod was being planned, Lifesite got wind of a meeting that was being held, a kind of a secret meeting among Jesuits. And one of the Jesuits mentioned just happens to be one of the authors of this document. Please go to lifesitenews.com and read more. I know this stuff seems incredible, unbelievable, but there you have it. Just to show you how deeply this goes, we are in the situation that was prophesied by Our Lady of Akita when she said cardinals would be against cardinals, bishops against bishops, because they're literally fighting heresy. Liz, give us the details on Cardinals Muller and Burke with regard to the German bishops.
Sure. This week, Cardinals Muller and Burke were on Raymond Arroyo's EWTN World Over, and we're talking about the Heretical Bishops Conference that had a synod and a vote of 38-9 to accept and promote overwhelmingly to approve blessings of same-sex unions, also the ordination of women. The synod is, really pushing the envelope and frankly stating that they, had the support of Francis in doing this. And the blessing of same-sex unions, the inclusion of LGBT into the priesthood, and the church is really, the overwhelming vote of the German Synod was what was being addressed by both Raymond Burke and Gerhard Mueller. Burke said that it is simply to be said clearly the question of God's plan for man and women. His plan is for the sexual union. His plan is for a marriage between a man and a woman. And he also talked about the purpose of a synod. The purpose of a synod is not to change doctrine, but to see how more effectively the doctrine can be proclaimed, not to invent something new. And what he said was, if this is what's going on in the synod, the German synod, then this poison, this defection from Catholic teaching and practice will affect the whole church. It's an impossible situation, he said, and it has to stop. Burke also believes that the church is being pushed to an agenda and an ideology that is contrary to the Catholic faith and is being used by the German Synod. And by the way, I think it's Bishop Bonney from Belgium has said that he's had conversations with Pope Francis, and Pope Francis is supportive of what they're doing. In fact, they are already conducting blessings of same-sex couples in Belgium. And Burke went on to say, and I think this is very important for people who are still confused by this, that these are human inventions, human ideologies that are being pushed, and the church is being used. And what it does is it renders the church into some kind of human agency, like a government agency that is being manipulated to foster certain programs and certain agendas. Cardinal Mueller, I thought, was even stronger with respect to his fellow German bishops in the synodal way. He said, quote, "It's not respecting the Christian anthropology that everybody is created according to the image and likeness of God, but they are occupied and influenced by the LGBT woke ideology, and that is meta-realistic and nihilistic, and therefore they have these strange ideas for the blessing of same-sex unions." He went on to say that this is blasphemic, and what he recommends is that there must be a trial of these 38 bishops who have supported this, voted for it, and supported it. They must be sentenced, and they must be removed from their office. If they are not converting themselves and they are not accepting Catholic doctrine, these trials must go forward. And we must, according to Cardinal Mueller, must resist this strange and wrong doctrine. I think this, Mueller also says that the church in Germany is worse than schism. worse than schism. And he said the very essence of Christianity in favor of its transformation into a variant of materialistic and nihilistic woke culture of man's self-redemption and self-creation. Last April, I think it was, there were about 70 bishops, including Burke and the late George Pell, who signed a letter addressed to the German hierarchy, warning them that the synodal way was going to lead to schism. There's been relative silence from the Vatican on this. I think certainly Mueller and Burke are trying to head off this, what I think a locomotive from the German Synod and German bishops. They're going to, it's clear, go their own way. They should be called out by the Vatican, by Francis, as being in schism. But I suspect that his silence and his wink and a nod, with what they're doing is the plan for the synod going forward. So this is very distressing. This is, really something that the church needs to speak with one voice, clear voice. At long last, although we've had evidence of this for the last few years, at long last, some prominent cardinals are speaking out.
How incredible, too, that these two cardinals were both heads of different dicasteries in the Vatican before. Cardinal Miller was the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, known anciently as the Holy Office, the ones actually responsible for doing those canonical trials, which would get rid of bishops, depose them or whatever else, and perhaps even drive them out of the priesthood. And who's Cardinal Burke but the former head of the Apostolic Signatura, which is the sort of Supreme Court of Rome. So if those bishops or cardinals wanted to take up the case where they were, drummed out by the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, they would take it up where? Well, with the court that Cardinal Burke was the Supreme Court Justice of. So it's incredible to come from those two, that, how serious the situation is and how guilty their confreres are for going down this road against the faith. So just unbelievable times, really does fulfill the prophecy of Our Lady of Akita. But Pope Francis, of his own accord, has been, once again, very controversial. He said, hell is not a place, but we need the details there. And Liz, if you would afterward, I want to mention something also with regard to John Paul II and Benedict on the same question, but please go ahead.
Pope Francis, in an interview with a Argentine newspaper, Perfil, it was called. Now, keep in mind, he did have a similar interview with Eugene Scalfari, his friend who's the atheist, who's the 91-year-old who doesn't take notes in the interview, where he said the same thing. But this time it was recorded. And he was asked, what is your interpretation of hell and paradise? And he said, hell is not a place. If one goes to attend the Last Judgment and sees the faces of those who go to hell, one gets scared. If you read Dante, you get scared. But these are media representations. You may recall that he also said to Scalfari, there was no Catholic God. I think he also said hell does not exist. And he, just described it as a state of mind where people live in hell continuously. A state of mind made up by the media, I guess. And this is more like a psychological state. That's his caricature of hell. And, what to me is particularly heinous, is that, did he even attend a seminary? I mean, the Babylon Bee, I can see the Babylon Bee having a field day with, is the Pope Catholic? He doesn't believe in hell. There are, 2 millennia of theological treatises on the existence of hell. And, I would presume that when Francis became Pope, the first thing he did was read The Secrets of Our Lady of Fatima. I mean, that's, what popes do. Of course, Our Lady at Fatima, when she talked to the children, she was very, very clear about hell. And this is, And we also know that she also taught the children, and this was in 1917. So she must have known what was coming in 100 years. She also told them what we call the Fatima prayer, which is now an integral part of the recitation of the rosary. Our Lady told the children, pray this after each decade of the rosary. Oh my Jesus, forgive us our sins. Save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those who are most in need of thy mercy. But she also went even further to underscore the existence of hell. She showed Lucia, and Lucia described in great, brutal detail the terrifying scene shown to her by the Blessed Mother. She saw plunged into a fire where demons and souls in human form, like transparent burning embers, all blackened and burnished bronze, floating about in conflagration, raised in the air by flames. She goes on to say, this scene was so horrible, it caused her to cry out. And she went on to describe in great detail. And Our Lady said to her kindly but sadly, you have seen hell where the poor souls of sinners go. So to me, this is Pope Bergoglio reads the secrets of Fatima, but I guess he's telling us that he knows better than the Blessed Mother. And there's, the Thomas Aquinas treatises on hell. Robert Bellarmine, a Jesuit, wrote extensively about the existence of hell. All these, readings, treatises, theories, beliefs from the Catholic Church over the years, the tenets, you would think that the Conclave Fathers in 2013 would have said, is there anybody, any papabile here, doubt the existence of hell? If so, raise your hand. You might not want to be the one we choose as Pope. It's kind of your basic 101 Catholicism. But here we had Our Lady in this century showing children the existence of hell, how awful, hideous, and permanent it is, teaching us all a prayer to say regarding hell. And yet Francis now not only tells Scalfari, but, as, kind of a pin on the end of his 10 years papacy, says, oh yeah, hell is just a psychological place, a place in your mind. So, very troubling. I heard it from a lot of non-Catholic friends on this issue, who saw this. They're just, they shake their head. They cannot believe what comes out of his mouth. And, I tend to think, John Henry, that sometimes, these Scalfari interviews where he floats these trial balloons, see how, the public responds to them, they back off and say, oh, we didn't have notes. Scalfari, misinterpreted what the Pope said. Well, in fact, he didn't misinterpret what the Pope said. The Pope, in fact, said it 5 years later. So there you have it. Hell is not a place of fire and brimstone, according to Jorge Bergoglio.
Now, it's very interesting that we have those interviews to look back to. Eugenio Scalfari, numerous interviews with the Pope. And every time they came out, they had sort of plausible deniability because, as you said, he didn't take notes, et cetera, et cetera. And the Vatican, though, would never correct them either. So the Pope at the time told him, hell, well, no, it doesn't exist. But Scalfari pushed him on the issue. He said, what if somebody doesn't want to go to heaven? The Pope said, then he ceases to exist, which, of course, is a heresy. Now, again, plausible deniability, because did he say it or did he not? Well, now comes this interview when he says this. Now, there's going to be talkback because if you look up the words he said, that it's about the condition. Let me look here. This was a commentary that came from both John Paul II and from Benedict with regard to purgatory. They also talked about it not being a physical place. In fact, if someone's interested in the reference, I can pull them here for you. But the point is that they were talking about purgatory, not hell. And there's a difference. In purgatory, it doesn't have to actually be a physical place because none of the people there, or the souls there, or the demons there have bodies. When there's no bodies, there's no need for a physical place. But is it a place? Indeed it is in a way of speaking, but it's not a physical place. However, in the catechism, in the dogmatic teaching of the church, yes, when we die, we don't have our bodies. But we will. At the general resurrection, our bodies will rise. It's part of our creed. It's everything that we teach and believe as Catholics, is that at the end of time, there will be a general resurrection. Our bodies will rise. Yes, it will reconstitute itself. The Lord can do it, obviously. But we're going to have our bodies. The bodies of those in heaven will go to glory. But the bodies also will come to those who are experiencing hell. And therefore, hell will be a physical place, even if it's not now. The scripture even talks about he will cast them into the lake of fire. Perhaps that's the place where he creates hell or whatever. But the point, though, is heaven's already a physical place. Our Lord is there in his body. So is Our Lady. And so heaven's already a physical place. And the hell at least will be, if it's not already. So very strange things. I just wanted to put that part of it out there, that understanding of purgatory and that physical place stuff, just so that if people get pushed back and look, John Paul II said it or Benedict said it, we'd at least have that knowledge as well. The crazy times are accentuated also in that we are being cut off. Lifesite is actually being cut off. YouTube has seen fit to cut Lifesite off from our viewers, from our subscribers. This time, not for medical misinformation, as we were cut off all the time under COVID, because all that stuff we said about COVID that now has magically come true and now is all right was illegal to say back in the day. So back in 2021, YouTube totally deleted our channel for medical misinformation, taking our 315,000 subscribers and tossing them out the window, as well as all of our video content that we've had there for over a decade. So over this past 2 years, we have built up another channel called the Jonathan Weston channel on YouTube. And we've been given our second strike there just now. We've been cut off. The first strike only a few weeks ago. We were cut off for a week from posting anything on YouTube. And we post more than one show a day every day. Now we've been cut off again for 2 weeks this time. And that really messes things up, by the way. If anybody knows about posting videos, you know that. It messes up the algorithm and makes your followers wonder what's going on. But this time, we weren't cut off for medical misinformation. We were cut off for our supposed medical information, of course. We were cut off for violating their hate policy with regard to LGBT. And that's just incredible, because if anybody knows, and I hope you do, know the stance of Lifesite, and we've had the same stance for more than 25 years of our existence. It's a stance of love. We love persons with LGBT attractions enough to tell them that the behavior, if they enter those relationships, the sexual behavior that they engage in is harmful. It's harmful for their bodies, and it's harmful for their souls. And you know what? Everybody in the medical community knows that that practice is harmful for the body. But you know what? Most of them don't have enough love to tell them that, because to do so threatens their own livelihood, and it threatens them from being canceled by the woke mob. Liz, do you have any other thoughts?
Yes, there's that expression, if you don't own the platform, you are owned by the platform. And the platform is a censoring tyrant, and it is violating Lifesite's religious freedom views. It censored, in the past, the important, valuable life and death information about COVID. And here again, we see as conservatives, as Catholics, that big tech is coming after our means of communication. I think this is going to continue to ramp up. And, it really means, from my perspective and knowing the importance of, I consider Lifesite News. I go to Lifesite News. I don't go to CNN or Fox anymore. I go to Lifesite News for my not only Catholic news, but also international news. And because of the great writers, the great research. And what concerns me is that cutting off my portal of information, my inability to share that information with people is, I find a absolute violation of religious freedom, and also, quite frankly, the ability of Lifesite News to thrive and to be able to monetize the incredible content that it has. For example, what we've been talking about today, Mikey's research on the Mayan rite, where no one had this information. Absolutely critical to know what's going on in our church. And so I think there's a couple things that I think people need to do. First of all, YouTube needs to hear from Lifesite readers. We need to double down on supporting Lifesite. Lifesite needs to, perhaps continue to build its own YouTube operation for itself, so that the information, but that's a very, very expensive undertaking. I understand that. But big tech is going to continue to double down. They know the power of pro-lifers, of the Catholic theology and religion, of conservatives. And we have seen it time and time again. So we have to use our voice. This is something that everybody can do. And those of you who are wondering, I don't give to church anymore, I think they need to really focus their support, financial support, and otherwise with Lifesite News. This is, it's, and it's not just for Catholics. As people go into YouTube looking for information, it's a form of evangelization. And they come across John Henry's videos, all the interviews that you do, the breaking news stories, which are on, and that kind of information really educates not just Catholics, but the public at large. And it draws them to, the life community, and it brings people to understand the importance of protecting life. And so I know personally from a lot of people that reading articles from Lifesite News has really turned their heart to become really pro-life. So to see this happen does not surprise me, but it is a clarion call for all of us to protect our media outlets, do what we need to do financially, and to support them with every ounce of energy. This is what the totalitarian state does. It shuts down dissent, shuts down information. And we know now without a shadow of a doubt that the government is pulling the strings of all the tech companies and telling them what to censor and what to shut down. So this is serious business for all of us. We can't allow Lifesite News to be marginalized. It needs to, the voice, like that megaphone, needs to go out to the world. And I know, and I know people even in China who, listen, watch Lifesite News, read Lifesite News, because that's where they get their information about what's going on in their country. So it's not surprising, but we've got to really take up arms and do our best to ensure that not only are you protected from this kind of censor, but really the word goes out that you become the premier voice for life on the internet.
You can see all of Lifesite's videos uncensored right at lifesitenews.com. Go to the top and look for video, and there you will find all of our offerings. Faith and Reason, John Henry Weston Show, the various different other shows. We have Mother Miriam every day. We have Bishop Strickland once a week. We have breaking news video, and we also have the Jonathan Van Maren Show that goes on podcast. There's lots of offerings there, and that's where it won't be censored. Go direct to lifesitenews.com. Liz, I didn't want to leave before we address one more, I think, very serious thing. President Xi Jinping of China met in Moscow with President Putin. Very concerning to see that alliance. I know a lot of people were thinking about President Putin as, the great bulwark against the New World Order. Well, actually, no. He's been in league with China and working with China on his own version of the New World Order. Liz, can you give us details?
Xi Jinping went to Moscow at the invitation of Vladimir Putin, and to, nominally under the rubric of congratulating Xi on his historic third term as president and king of the world. And so this is really seen as a affirmation of personal power, making him a significant figure in the world. And Xi intends to use his power. And Russia has formed this alliance, shockingly, with Xi. And what's going to happen is Russian oil and gas will be sold to China. And as Russia sells its oil and gas reserves to the rest of the world, Asia, South America, and around the world, they will use the Chinese currency, the yuan, as its currency. And what is so troubling about that is that it's undermining the US dollar as the main currency in the world. We have seen new alliances with Saudi Arabia and Iran. This alliance with Russia and China is extremely concerning. And of course, nobody's paying much attention because the media is not giving it the attention it deserves. They're more interested in, Donald Trump's, various trials. But the agenda of the Chinese and the Russians is to announce that there is a one world order and that the United States' power has come to an end. And it's their intention, the Chinese and the Russians, to present themselves as the peacemakers and the champions of this new alignment. And one of the things that they said is no single country should dictate the international order. So they are embracing the Agenda 2030 from the UN, the UN Sustainable Goals, and China remains committed to being the arch enemy of the United States. So it is a very troubling development. These two superpowers coming together with the United States as the perceived enemy. And and also the economic impact that this will have on the US dollar around the world.
People have to understand, Putin is saying some good things. We don't deny that. In fact, given our administration in America right now, with everybody as woke, LGBT to the hilt, Putin can point here and go, they've lost their minds. He pointed to the Anglicans the other day who are trying to suggest that God is somehow not a male or something and just weird. And he quotes scripture, to say, Lord, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. So he has good talking points on a lot of things where he can point to insanity to bring his people along with him. But what their end proposal has nothing to do with Christianity. In fact, when I was in Moscow about a decade ago or so now, it was very hard to get to a Catholic church because Catholicism there is restricted big time. And so this is not Shangri-La. This is not what we hope everyone's hoping for. This is a very scary alliance that, is part of a new world order. They have a different world order in mind. There's warring factions looking for a new world order of their own that they can control. And it's just another version of that. The only new world order we need is the one world order under Jesus Christ, sovereign king.
We've been talking about China. We've been talking about, really the persecution that is now underway around the world with Christians. And I'm thinking of one of my favorites, Chinese Cardinal Ignatius Kung. And he is, in the 1950s, he was arrested by Mao and spent 30 years in jail. He was tortured in solitary confinement. He was the bishop of Shanghai and who's loved by the people. They arrested Catholics, priests, deported any missionaries. It was a terrible time for the church. Many Catholics never even knew if Bishop Kung was alive because he just disappeared. Well, as we know, he was released after 30 years in prison, and he went to Rome after he left China. because while he was in prison, John Paul II awarded him in pectore, in secret, the cardinal red hat. And so here is his speech, in his homily, I should say, Cardinal Ignatius Kung, in June 30th, 1991, at the Church of the Queen of Angels. I'm just going to quote a little bit about it. And he came to receive the red hat. And this is what he said. And it's really a homily for all Catholics, not just the Christians who are, in many respects, the Catholics in China are in worse shape now because they don't have the support of the Vatican anymore. The underground church is being persecuted by both the Vatican and the CCP. But here's what Cardinal Kung said in this homily in Rome after 30 years of imprisonment. During the past 40 years, the church in China has suffered severe persecution. We have been able to stand on the front line of the church. This is our glory. We should be glad and rejoice. As the Shanghai Catholic youth wrote to me, quote, "We are greatly honored to have been born and lived at this important time, able to hear the witness of God and Jesus Christ. We should not be frightened when persecution comes, because it is not by our own strength that we conquer the world, but by the strength of the glorified Christ, who has risen from the dead, who said, 'Do not fear, for I have conquered the world.'" In Russia, during the time of Stalin, one of the communist leaders attacked the church mercilessly in a speech, and he made this in front of a group of Catholics. When he finished, a very old man in the crowd stood up and said in a loud tone, "The Lord is truly risen. Alleluia." After this, the old man sat down peacefully. This was the shortest but most powerful reply that could have been made to a communist rant. Kung ended his homily this way. During the ceremony, when the Holy Father gave me the red hat, he said to me these ancient words: "Receive the red hat. You must be faithful, steadfast, indomitable, even to the shedding of blood." The Holy Father repeatedly emphasized, even to the shedding of blood. I was in prison for 30 years for my faith, and it can be said that I only suffered half a martyrdom. I have not yet come to the point of shedding my blood. Now that I wear the red hat and I have heard what the Holy Father expects from all cardinals, although I am old, I must be more vigorous, make more effort, that I may be faithful to Christ, to his church, even to the shedding of blood and execution. Pray for the suffering church in China. That's what's expected of our cardinals. Remember the words of Cardinal Ignatius Kung.
Thank you, Liz, so very much. Great to be with you again.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
And God bless all of you. And we'll see you next time on Faith and Reason. Hi, everyone. This is John Henry Weston. We hope you enjoyed this program. To see more like it, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from Lifesite News. Check the links in the description to read more and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all the latest life, family, faith, and freedom news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.